When the F-22 Raptor was unleashed, there was a fundamental shift across the world. Stealth was no longer just for bombers, but a means for a fighter jet to go from a brawling dogfighter to a silent angel of death. Only, the Raptor was limited in its role, more designed as an aerial interceptor and economically hindered by its low production rate. The US military and many of its allies observed the incredible capabilities of possessing such a stealth fighter. Learning much from the F-22 program, they decided a large production of such 5th generation stealth fighter was needed to turn enemy air defences into little more than an inconvenience. They came up with what would perhaps be the most hated and yet most lethal fighter jet in the world, the F-35 Lightning. The F-35 is the next generation solution to the next generation challenges faced by the US and its allies. Made to nullify enemy air defences, make enemy air threats become enemy air targets, and ensure US aerial dominance for decades to come. The F-35 is a result of the Joint Strike Fighter program, which saw a competition between Boeing's X-32 and Lockheed Martin's X-35. The X-32 had a number of flaws. A vertical takeoff required much more work than the X-35, with a major redesign required from the tested model, unlike the X-35, which was much more in common with the F-35 it would go on to be produced as. The Joint Strike Fighter would go on to be a huge export success, with 20 customers at this point in time made up of the following countries, and a number of other nations vying to purchase their own F-35s. Canada would be one of these nations, being a metaphor for how successful the F-35 will go on to become.
A Liberal government will also do what the Harper Conservatives ought to have said years ago. We will not buy the F-35 fighter jet.
The reason for the ongoing export and strategic success would best be explained by looking at the Joint Strike Fighter as not one, but 3 different aircraft. Replacing the F-16 and its peers was the F-35A, coming in as the most basic and cheap variant of the F-35 with no VTOL capabilities or enlarged wingspan seen in the other variants, which would be the most popular for export. Then would be what was the Harrier's replacement, the F-35B, popular with customers such as the Royal Navy and the Japanese Navy, allowing even smaller, cheaper helicopter carriers to provide greater power projection than ever before with the VTOL capabilities provided with this B variant. And lastly was the wide wingspanned F-35C, coming in to replace the FA-18, designed primarily for carrier use with Kaboda systems that are common in the US Navy, and perhaps the most visually distinct version with its larger wingspan. The differences between the multiple variants is as shown here. Notably, the F-35B is the most constrained performance-wise, as is expected with VTOL platforms. While many like to talk about the F-35's performance in singular, there is such variety that this doesn't paint an accurate picture. The F-35A has the highest G rating, whereas the F-35C has the largest range, so it's important to keep this in mind moving forward. When discussing the F-35B and its VTOL capabilities, it's quite common to hear the claim that the system used was copied from the Soviet VTOL aircraft, the Yak-141. This applies to 2 different elements of the system. One is how the lift fans work, and the other is how the downwards movement of the free-bearing swivel nozzle of the engine exhaust works. Both of these claims, however, are not true, and I think it would be unfair not to correct this misconception before moving on. See, in the Yak-141's lift system, exhaust of the main engine goes through one nozzle, while 2 more lift engines provide extra lift. This is different to the F-35B, which uses only one engine. The lift fan for the F-35B is then powered by a driveshaft connected to this single engine. This entirely different and ingenious system should be a lot lighter and easier to maintain than the system used on the Yak. following this to the exhaust nozzle actually takes a bit of digging, taking us back to an old, incomplete project for an aircraft you may never have heard of, the Convair 200. This aircraft was designed for the same purpose as the Harrier and Yak-141, but back in the early 1970s. The program would eventually fail, but what is notable is the engine that was built for it, the JTF-22A-30A. In 1967, Pratt Whitney, who made the F-135 engine used in the F-35, was designing and testing a 3-bearing swivel nozzle for this very program. Perhaps due to the fact the Yak's project got much further and the fact the Convair 200 is not very heard of, has led to this misconception. But it seems rather to be the case that Pratt & Whitney continued with their engine development using a design they had already come up with. Perhaps even with a large number of espionage missions taking place during the Cold War, the Yak-141's design may in fact owe itself to the Convair 200. That isn't to say they didn't study the Yak, as they certainly did when Lockheed actually worked on the project following the fall of the USSR after investing into the company, but the F-35B system is without a doubt very much of its own design. The development of the F-35 with so many aspects would not go without issue, of course. What is a fair criticism of the development stage was the delays that were faced at the time. The F-35 would be many years behind schedule and over budget, but this was also partially caused by the issue of concurrency. See, the F-35 was in production before its true development was actually completed, meaning testing would find new issues that needed to be rectified while the aircraft was already being produced. Most of these issues, however, were ironed out as time went on. Production ramped up and development concluded, with there now being around 1,000 airframes completed, dwarfing the numbers of all other stealth aircraft in the world put together. So while the F-35 vastly outnumbers its competition, it also seems to outclass them. The F-35 is in fact the most dangerous fighter in the skies right now, with so many nations recognising this and jumping on board the customer list. So what is it about this that makes the Joint Strike Fighter so lethal? When it comes to armament, the A and C models are able to carry 18,000 pounds of payload, with the B version being a little less at 15,000 pounds. When looking to maintain stealth characteristics, however, the F-35 has internal missile storage, which can carry 2 air-to-air missiles such as the AIM-120D and a pair of 2,000 pound JDAMs, with the B variant being cut down to a pair of 1,000 pound JDAMs. The F-35A comes standard with a 25mm Gore 22 cannon, whereas the B and C variants much rely on an optional external gun pod. What really makes the F-35 truly deadly, however, is its sensors. We're about to get technical now, so feel free to pause the video and make yourself a tea or a coffee before we move forward. The F-35's strengths are impressive, but complex, making it a little bit of a task to understand why this plane is just so game-changing. This does, however, somewhat explain why the F-35 is a bit of an underdog, with most people being more interested in the basics that they can comprehend, such as speed, looks, turn radius, and so on. This is understandable, however none of these things are nearly as important as people may think. In fact, studies of World War II and Vietnam aerial combat found that for around 70 to 80% of pilots that had survived being shot down said they had no idea they were being targeted to begin with, showing that situational awareness was paramount to being the hunter and not the prey in aerial combat. So to ensure this, the F-35 employs a number of systems, one of which being its Distributed Aperture System, also known as DAS, specifically the AN/AAQ-37 Electro-Optical DAS. The system is made up of 6 infrared sensors equipped with wide-angle lenses, offering complete 360-degree spherical coverage, staring in every direction, allowing nothing to go unnoticed. This configuration enables the detection and tracking of incoming missiles, in addition to tracking enemy vehicles within short to medium ranges. This is one of the reasons the F-35 is able to fire missiles at targets that are behind it, with all this information being relayed directly into the pilot's visor. The true range of the system is not known, but was able to detect and track a SpaceX Falcon 9 launch from 1,300 kilometers away. This system is a huge leap in situational awareness from back when A-10 pilots were having to visually confirm targets with the incredibly reliable but somewhat outdated Mark 1 eyeball. This isn't all, however. The F-35 also has its AAQ-40 electro-optical targeting system, also known as EOTS. This enables F-35 pilots to observe distant air, land and sea objects. It supports the pilot and or onboard systems in recognising unfamiliar elements, undertaking surveillance and reconnaissance tasks. These functions encompass target identification and engagement, evaluating battle impact, BDA, which is assessing target outcomes, and broader intelligence gathering objectives. The system also has the capability to independently survey the sky for aircraft, functioning as an infrared search and track, also known as IRST, sensor. This aids the F-35 in silently detecting and monitoring potential threats by sensing their heat emissions. In legacy aircraft, this was done with IRST domes. This newer system, however, has many advantages, one of which being that those old domes used to cause a large radar cross-section spike, making the user stand out on radar much greater, unlike EOTS, which is built with stealth in mind. Whenever there's a requirement for the F-35 or an allied aircraft to relay laser-guided munitions such as the GBU-12 Paveway 2 or GBU-49 Paveway 4 at a designated target, the EOTS is also capable of sending out an encoded infrared laser pulse. This pulse serves as a guidance for accurately directing these munitions towards both stationary and moving targets. To make all these sensors so effective, the Joint Strike Fighter also has cutting-edge sensor fusion. This involves the skillful amalgamation of data from multiple sensors to create a coherent picture of what is happening around the aircraft. Although sensor integration is not a novel concept, with numerous 4th generation fighters already incorporating some level of sensor fusion into their systems. However, the F-35 takes a notable leap forward with its highly sophisticated approach, as it harnesses contemporary sensors paired with state-of-the-art software. In the F-35 system, sensor fusion effectively combines target paths using statistical and probability calculations. This means that instead of only choosing the top sensor and displaying its target path, the system utilises data like bearing, elevation, range, velocity and more from all sensors, which is done autonomously. This not only decreases the pilot's workload hugely, but gives situational awareness that have never been seen before. This is all before even mentioning the F-35's radar and electronic warfare capabilities. Did you finish your drink yet? Because if so, you may want to pour another. The Joint Strike Fighter uses the AESA AN/APG-81, an improvement on the AN/APG-77 from the F-22 Raptor. However, in the upcoming Block 4 update, the F-35 will be receiving the newer AN/APG-85 along with many other impressive upgrades. What makes this unit such a great complement to the F-35's already impressive sensor array is due to several key factors. It features a notable advantage in size with almost twice as many transit receive modules compared to aircraft such as the Rafale. This size advantage translates into superior performance across all aspects. The F-35's radar offers exceptional resolution, as demonstrated by its ability to autonomously classify ground targets and distinguish intricate details such as decoys, vehicle tracks and patterns. Additionally, the F-35's radar serves as the primary transmitter for its electronic warfare suite, granting it tenfold more effective radiated power than dedicated electronic warfare platforms like EA-18 Growlers. This empowers the F-35 with comparable electronic warfare capabilities to these Growlers and even surpasses them in certain domains, all while being capable of its other roles at the same time. The radar's larger aperture contributes to improved low probability of incept, also known as LPI, characteristics, and enhanced jamming resistance, indirectly enhancing electronic countermeasures, also known as ECCMs. Another strength of this AESA radar is the fact it eliminates the issue present on legacy radars that essentially work like a lighthouse giving away the aircraft's position when in use. The F-35's radar also benefits from the synergy with its array of potent passive sensors that we mentioned earlier. Unlike 4th generation fighters, where radar is the primary source of situational awareness, the F-35's sensor fusion allows the radar to autonomously engage targets identified by the DAS or EOTS, greatly enhancing target tracking and situational awareness. In contrast, many legacy platforms have their radar perform the majority of situational awareness tasks, without the level of autonomous coordination and queuing that the F-35's radar achieves through its integrated sensor fusion, which is done autonomously. Okay, so you get the idea. The F-35 holds the best situational awareness of any fighter in the skies to this day and for many years to come. But that's only the unclassified stuff. And then there's the aforementioned Block 4 update, which will make it even better. Combined with the stealth capabilities of this aircraft, which we will get to shortly, the F-35 is a huge threat to enemy air defences. Hard to see, hard to hide from, and armed to the teeth. But what about enemy air targets? What if all systems fail, including all other aircraft and ground arrays working with the F-35's data link, and somehow an enemy fighter manages to get within the visual range of the Joint Strike Fighter? Well, it is by no means a sitting duck. In fact, it still holds a huge advantage. Thanks to high angle of attack and impressive wing loading, the aircraft proves lethal in dogfighting scenarios, where these factors can often be the deciding factor, because while manoeuvres like the Cobra are impressive, they lose a lot of momentum and energy, something the F-35 is not concerned with due to its incredible thrust to weight performance. This is all to say, it can dogfight, but it likely won't. After all, why would you if you can shoot down the plane that is outturning you from wherever they are in your vicinity? This is not only down to the sensors fitted, but the missiles that are carried, such as the A9X, which really deserves its own video with how impressive this missile can perform. One thing's for sure, the F-35 is not any less lethal when you get close to it, in the rare case this is even achieved. Last on the impressive technical tidal wave is the stealth aspect of the Joint Strike Fighter. Much to do with this is indeed classified, but from what is known, the F-35 uses the latest breakthrough in US stealth coating technology, employing its new FiberMat radar absorbent material. As well as this, it's the most up-to-date design process and simulation to find the ultimate shape for achieving such stealthy characteristics. While there is no legitimate unclassified figure, the F-22 is estimated to have a frontal radar cross-section of around 0.0001 meters squared, with the F-35 apparently exceeding this, according to United States Air Force 4-star General Mike Hostage. Something I saw a lot on my Su-57 video was people saying that it doesn't matter if you have stealth, as you can be detected anyway in some cases. So, to explain stealth as a metaphor, you are not invisible. You are just harder to see. For radar, this is making the radar cross-section as small as possible. Imagine you could make an item smaller, it would therefore be harder to see. If you made an object go from meters wide to mere millimeters, you would still be able to see it with the context of it being right in front of your face. This is similar to the fact stealth aircraft can be detected when near to sensors, but they can be unseen from further distances that still put them within the range they need to be to engage their target. It's all well and good saying an S-400 SAM system can detect an F-35 from 50 miles away, but if the F-35 can destroy that SAM system from 100 miles away, you get the picture. And this all goes without saying that the electronic warfare capabilities present on the aircraft will also be put to use nullifying hostile systems. With this picture now put together, the F-35 is incredibly hard to detect, track and engage, while being armed to the teeth and able to find and engage anything in the skies today. So now we've addressed why it's so good, it's time to see why it's claimed to be so bad. It goes without saying, the F-35 has not been a popular aircraft. So why do so many people hate this jet? Well, That comes down to a lot of claims, many of which are fair criticism, but many are simple misconceptions about design and purpose. One of the first examples of this is the F-35's top speed. All Joint Strike Fighters are rated for Mach 1.6, and admittedly this is slower than many other options, and many use this to simply tarnish the F-35 as a bad aircraft. But the fact is that battles aren't decided on a drag strip. In a world where fighter jets are judged in some sort of top trumps way with nothing but numbers, this is one of the first examples of undeserved hate being brought from misunderstanding. See, the F-35 is fully supersonic capable and by no means a slouch, but many made this top speed figure to be a flaw, simply because there were other aircraft that were faster than the Joint Strike Fighter. In truth, this is by all means not an issue, and is in fact a result of much research on past wars to find out how much speed was actually needed. As the faster you aim to make an aircraft, the more you have to sacrifice other strengths such as payload, range, or in the modern world, stealth. In Vietnam combat, despite the F-4 Phantom of the time being capable of Mach 2, almost no aircraft flew above Mach 1.6, and not one aircraft went over Mach 1.8. In fact, during the Gulf War, US aircraft never flew above Mach 1.03, even when facing the exceptionally fast MiG-25s that were present in this conflict. A great example of faster aircraft being outperformed is the Falklands aerial campaign, where Harrier jump jets, limited to Mach 0.9, were able to gain aerial superiority against the much faster daggers they were up against, which could do more than twice the speed of the Harriers at Mach 2.1. And yet, they met heavy losses when battling the jump jets. So with this in mind, if more speed than necessary is going to take away from real necessities, this would actually make the F-35 a less effective aircraft, and explains why the top speed is perfectly adequate. Briefly moving on to manoeuvrability, the F-35 is fully capable of engaging targets that can outturn it as mentioned earlier, while also having very good wing loading and angle of attack, allowing it to make tight turns for prolonged periods. Seeing as I've already addressed the F-35's dogfighting capabilities, I'll instead address why this hardly even matters. See, the F-35 is designed to engage aerial targets long before it can see them. This is beyond visual range or BVR combat, and with its advanced sensor suite, stealth and armament, it's going into that fight with a lot of advantages. For an aircraft to get within visual range, all systems would have to have failed, which is so unlikely it's an anomaly and not by any means something the F-35's rivals are betting on. While discussing the visual range combat, it's worth moving on to the next claim, and that is that the F-35's gun doesn't shoot straight. Now, as mentioned earlier in the video, the F-35A comes with an internal cannon from standard, whereas the F-35B and C variants have an optional gun pod. For clarity, this claim is to do with the F-35A's internal cannon only. There is an issue here, in that after much use, the mounts for the Gore 22A 25mm cannon begin to crack, causing deviation in the weapon's accuracy in correlation to the targeting system. So while the gun itself is perfectly accurate, a redesign is being done for new mounting systems to be implemented soon, but this is again only an issue for one variant, and with some nations like China completely abandoning the autocannon on the J-20, it's clear as to how overstated the importance of this may be, with some believing the autocannon should never have even been implemented on the F-35A at all. Nonetheless, as small of an issue this is, it is a valid problem with the program and worth mentioning, albeit this is not a core design issue and something that is inevitably going to be addressed, albeit at some extra cost. This issue brings us on to the next issue, which is the aircraft's readiness rates. Now, there are many ways this is calculated. There is fully mission capable and mission capable. For fully mission capable, your aircraft is capable of fulfilling all of its mission types of which it is designed to do. Now, with an aircraft that is so diverse in its roles, you may see why this may look bad on paper. Mission capable, however, is when the aircraft can perform some of its tasks. So, if you are, for example, experiencing issues with your autocannon, that will cause a dip in your full mission capability rates, and make people understandably question the aircraft's quality. Despite this, the F-35 actually shows a rather average readiness rates that is very similar to many legacy platforms, and much better than the much more popular and less capable F-22. Here is how the F-35 compares, and how it becomes apparent the Joint Strike Fighter is no anomaly in readiness, but perfectly adequate, especially when considering how new and advanced the aircraft is, with so many more systems that can go wrong. An issue that is genuine, however, and cannot be attributed to a mere lack of context, is the F-135 engine. As usual, articles reporting the engine being faulty means many just assuming the plane flat out doesn't work, when in reality, any issue with the engine will also affect readiness rates. So that ties to that claim, while also giving a good picture of how this may be somewhat overstated. See, this isn't resulting in the Pratt Whitney engines outright not working, but putting an increased burden on maintenance. So why does this issue exist, and will it be fixed? Well, with each update, the F-35 has grown more technologically advanced each time, and that means many more systems are not only requiring more air to cool, but also resulting in more heat as a result. This is therefore causing more stress and overheating at high performance that is degrading some parts faster, and therefore being an issue of cost. In 2024, we should see the announcement of the engine core upgrade package to remedy this issue, but as of this point in time, it is a fair point of criticism. Next on this list is the accidents. It goes without saying, any new aircraft is going to face a number of losses, but how bad really is the F-35? Now, it's easy to see news of an aircraft going down and coming to the simplistic conclusion that the entire design is just bad, such as the last SU-57 accident. Truth is, the F-35 is perhaps one of the most successful aircraft when it comes to avoiding such accidents. In fact, in the same time the Joint Strike Fighter has been flying, the F-16, A-10 and F-15 all managed more accidents in the same time frame, with the F-35 having less overall accidents than just the amount of fatalities in the F-16. When we look at the numbers and consider the amount of flight hours and high production number, the F-35 is, if anything, quite impressive. In 12 years of service, 0.77% of F-35s crashed, compared to 2.14% for the F-22, 8.7% for the A-10 and 10.43% for the F-15, and a whopping 12.73% for the F-16. Despite the F-16's development woes, it would go on to be a great success in its role. Another key factor in why the crash rate is not only impressively good now, but likely to get better, is that flight hours for the F-35 are outrunning crashes, with the airframes proving increasingly reliable as more flight hours are accrued. The issue is, much discussion is often as simple as someone calling the plane poor because some articles exist of it crashing, without the known context that it will require a miracle for this to not happen. A recent F-35 crash was in fact purely down to human error, forgetting to remove a protective cover from the aircraft. This isn't the last reason people have hated the Joint Strike Fighter, with flashy headlines and numbers thrown out without any nuance, and that is the cost of the program and aircraft. Amusingly, this is partially the fault of the US government, as it made an estimate as to how much a weapons program will cost in the lifetime cycle of the platform, including the total cost of research and development, wages, parts, production and maintenance of the entire fleet until 2077, with predicted inflation taken into account, which means compared to older estimates based on much less, the F-35 on paper looked unbelievably expensive when using those other aircraft as a reference point on what it actually costs to build and use a fighter. Not only this, but as mentioned earlier, the F-35 is not just one system, it's three. if we were to use the same metrics for the F-16, F-A-18 and Harrier that the Joint Strike Fighter program replaces, the cost would come to around 4 trillion, which is much higher than the 1.7 trillion figure for the entire Joint Strike Fighter program. Next is the actual per unit cost, where it starts to seem the opposite may actually be true. Maybe, just maybe, an aircraft absolutely slated for its cost is actually a bargain. As more units are built, the economics of scale inevitably set in and the price per unit drastically drops. According to latest figures, the F-35 can be picked up from as little as $70 million for the F-35A and around $80 million for the more advanced F-35B and C variants. Now, I'm going to put on the screen the cost per unit of other modern fighters currently on the market or coming onto it, with the numbers of them that have been produced. And when the context of the F-35's capabilities are taken into account, you may see why the Joint Strike Fighter has been completely mistreated. The F-22 is a great example and eliminates any geopolitical bias. An aircraft absolutely adored by the public, yet it's been more of an economic and production failure than the F-35. In fact, with the Joint Strike Fighter is outproducing the F-22 by 5 times. With thousands more due to be made, the Raptor is, if anything, the most expensive option. That's before even addressing the F-35's advancement in technology ahead of the Raptor. Now, the F-22 is a very capable aircraft, and by no means do I think people should not love this gorgeous plane. And perhaps that's part of why it has such a cult following, but the fact the superior F-35 is treated the way it is in comparison is truly sad to see. The F-35 has been lambasted in the media due to poor understanding of context within cost estimates, overconfidence in development going flawlessly, and a good portion of ideologically motivated reputational sabotage. The truth, the F-35 isn't bad. It's not even decent. It's simply incredible. It's the most lethal, stealthy, advanced fighter jet in the world right now, with production numbers going well into the thousands, going on to be a huge export success in over 20 different countries across the world. It deserves so much more than the reputation it has been unfairly labelled with. So, join me in giving some love to this beautiful aircraft.